الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أدعوك كما أمرتني فاستجب لي كما وعدتني إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء قلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني النفع بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يهجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك. أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أهترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا مؤترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا نتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سأة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالفي برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضئا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من ندنيت أو تشرد من ناويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارها سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم ضعفي قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي، وربي صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولا صرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولا بكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يهرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملته به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين يقطع لولا ما هكمت به من تأذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد في المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك. قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من علي جريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيتها وبفضلك سترتا، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أهوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك، والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أصرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأصنع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وخافة مخافة الموقنين، واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وأعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني أثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. سورة المباركة الفاتحة. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بالثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني ضل في ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كما أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأضداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mu'minin wal-Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayatama Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's Majlis. Par Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. Salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. إياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last Thursday, we asked the question, when and how will the Imam of the time lead this movement? What are the specific actions that he's going to take that we should be looking forward to? And we said that there are too many unknowns to give specific details. We can't know exactly what he's going to do. And we gave two reasons for why that's the case. One is because we don't and nobody will ever know the exact time when he will reappear. And because we don't know the exact time, and even if we did know the exact time, we wouldn't know the environment and the situation when the Imam would appear, meaning technology, media, society, politics. We have no idea to predict what's going to change. And even when people think they have a good understanding right now, we gave the example. Even if the Imam were to return tonight, tomorrow, and we might take a guess that he'll use social media, he'll use the internet, this and this, whatever, all of these things can change, with the snap of a finger. And we gave an example, if anybody's seen any Hollywood movie, right? Something simple like an EMP device could completely knock out the electrical grid and all electrical devices, and then we would be without the internet, without social media, without cars, without all modern technology. So we shouldn't specify and just rely on things that you and I may understand. No, we shouldn't be specific. And we should be very, very careful as well, ourselves or listening to speakers who try to describe things that, the Imam's coming, it's right around the corner. He's going to come at this point or this point. Nobody knows. We gave the narration from the Imam saying that no person knows this date. Nobody can say that it's coming close, and nobody should say that it's never going to happen as well. So we have to be careful of these sort of specific ideas. Then from there we connected this to, as we commemorated the Shahada of the sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we were using his example to show, okay, well, what should we keep in mind then about possibly what would the situation of humanity be like before the Imam comes? Or, in other words, what do we need to do to prepare or to set the stage or to look around and figure out, to understand when the Imam's going to come back? So what we had talked about is that, look, during the time, specifically in the sixth Imam, according to some historians, he, in one instance, had openly declared and invited people towards his wilayah and his imamah, right? Openly rejecting the khulafa of that time. And the reason we said that that was the case was because the ulama say the system known as the wikala system was ready. The overall Muslims were ready to support him. And then for various reasons, they then abandoned him. And perhaps since that abandonment took place, maybe this is why amongst that imam and many other imams, we see this famous type of narration in which they say that intidharul faraj afdalul ibadah. That intidharul faraj, waiting for the return of the imam, is the best ibadah, the best thing that you can do. Not the intidhar where we sit around, but perhaps it's one where we try to re-establish this wikala system, which may have been the main factor which led to the imam openly declaring his wilayah in front of everybody. Perhaps this is the thing that you and I need to start working on right away. So, we've finished our discussion on talking about objections to the Imam and replying to that. So we're now going to shift over to our next subtopic in terms of our topic of Imam Mahdi and Mahdawiyah, which is about how do we prepare ourselves using what we've already talked about. And based on that discussion, the general idea is that in order for us to get ready for the Imam, the main thing that you and I need to do as individuals, as families, as communities, is to build a wilayah-ready community. To build a system within our own communities which is ready for wilayah. Which is ready for when the Imam comes, he can declare his imamah and wilayah and all of us would be ready to accept. And what we'll see, inshallah, through these discussions that we'll have as we open up this new subtopic, we're going to look at some of the main things which are used to develop a wikala system and some of the other things which become an obstacle to setting up that wikala system. So the things that we need to set up and the things that we have to block and make sure that doesn't interfere with that process. We talked about on Saturday how there were three sort of main components of this wikala system. The first was legal stuff, ahkam, fiqh, right? The imam would use representatives to go and explain his rulings. The second was economic, that the imam would use his representatives in all these different provinces to collect khums and zakat, baytul mal, all of these things to be used for the projects that they needed, that they deemed fit for the Shia diaspora at that time. And the third thing too is that all the other questions that needed to be answered, even theological questions, religious beliefs, aqa'id, those same representatives would answer on behalf of the various imams. So that is what we're going to start with tonight, inshallah, in the first sort of building block of how we can go ahead and start building a wilayah-ready system and looking at things which will help or hurt us in setting up our strong theology, which will get us ready for the 12th Imam's reappearance. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuhu sharif. Salawat. We have a narration from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farj. Where he's reported to have said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يخرج المهدي من ولدي والولدي. That the sa'a, the hour, meaning the final hour, day of judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah, that won't happen until the Mahdi comes out from amongst my descendants, my family. So Yawm al-Qiyamah won't happen until, and we all know this, right? Even Ahlul Sunnah won't deny that. And many other religions won't deny that. A savior has to come before the end of times, right? So that's kind of step one before Day of Judgment. There has to be some savior, somebody there. For us specifically, Al-Mahdi, right? And then he continues, وَلَا يَخْرُجُ الْمَهْدِي. The Mahdi won't come out. He won't reappear until what? حَتَّى يَخْرُجُ سِتُّونَ كَذَّابًا كلهم يقول أنا النبي. So Al-Mahdi, that savior, that final representative, he won't appear. He won't come until 60 liars come, all of them saying that I'm a prophet. Ana Nabi. So we have now two styles of prophecies here. One saying that before the day of judgment, the Mahdi will appear. Before the Mahdi appears, according to this, we have different narrations, but this one says 60 people will come forward and falsely claim that they are prophets. So the topic that we want to talk about tonight in terms of theological blocks that may come in our way is these false claimants to becoming or acting as representatives of the religion. Now we might think that, okay, in this context of Mahdawiyya, we might be thinking that there are definitely going to be people who come out and claim that they are the Mahdi. Right? We've seen this, even to this day, people are doing that. In Iran, people get arrested almost every single week because they come out, they claim that they're the Mahdi, they perform certain actions or they say certain things, they attract this cult following, and then the authorities catch on and then they get put in jail. In Iraq, for many of you who have followed recent history, when the U.S. Army invaded and occupied Iraq, right, back in the 2000s, when that took place, there was individuals also, one specific individual who came out, claimed he was the Mahdi, and he had a bunch of followers from among the Shias who came out, and they went and they attacked some of the various shrines. Right? So some of the various Shia brigades had to go and fight against them and defend the shrines because of people like this. So this is not like something ancient. This is happening in our times right now, in Iraq, in Iran. Many of you know I don't need to give people's names, but there are individuals who have a strong social media presence who are coming out saying that either that they are the Mahdi or that they are the direct representative of the Mahdi right now, and you have to follow their orders. So there are many false claimants to representatives of the religion. This is happening right now. Now we might think, okay, so we have to make sure we understand Mahdawiyya so that we know who's a false claimant. But I want to take it even farther back. Because this same idea of false claimants happened even during the time of the Prophet. Not even after his death, but even during his lifetime, people were coming out claiming that they were prophets. So I want to give examples of individuals who did this throughout Islamic history, starting during the life of the Prophet, and if we have time, other examples, and extrapolate from that some ideas to help us build up our aqaid, our philosophy, so that you and I don't become subject and follow these false prophets and false Mahdis. So that will be our discussion tonight. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So many of you may have heard the name of this individual, Musaylima, right? Musaylima al-Kadhab. I'm sure you probably heard the story that Musaylima, after the death of Rasulullah, he claimed that he was the Prophet. Then Abu Bakr had sent forces, right, during these Ridda wars. They had sent him, and that brigade led by Khalid ibn Walid went and they killed him and his followers. Right? So these Ridda wars, which again were right in, as soon as the Prophet died, Abu Bakr, took the Khilafah. He went and there was multiple individuals claiming that they were prophets. And Abu Bakr with his supporters went out with the army and they went and killed all of these individuals, right? So these Ridda wars were known as the apostasy or apostate wars. Normally you and I in our Shia history really don't talk about this, but for Ahlul Sunnah they do talk about these things a lot, right? This usually comes more in their history than it does in our history. Although for us it actually is very important as well. Because some of the individuals, this is not our topic, but just for your information, some of the individuals that Abu Bakr did go against were supporters and followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Because they knew, of course, that Imam Ali was the rightful Khalifa, so they refused to pay zakah to Abu Bakr. And because of that, he had sent the army against him. And many people asked, where were all the supporters of Imam Ali? Yes, a lot of people, they went in their houses, they didn't come out. There was a lot of those cowards. But there were many supporters as well who refused, who were ready to fight, right, from different provinces. They didn't pay any money and any heed towards the Khilafah of Abu Bakr or anybody else. But Abu Bakr sent an army against them. They sent sort of like mobster, these thugs, and they went and they eliminated people like that. Right? So there's a lot of intimidation and fear and things like that going on. Anyway, I want to go back to this specific individual, Musaylima. So Musaylima, we know him as Musaylima al-Kadhab. I want to give you a brief bio about him. Again, normally when we hear his name, we only hear about him declaring prophethood after the death of Rasulullah. But knowing about his past is actually very important as well. So his actual name, according to some historians, is actually Maslama, not Musaylima. Maslama, and there's various reasons or various meanings about what Maslama means. It could be somebody who's indirectly known or indirectly unknown, or somebody who is at peace or provides peace, many different sort of translations. But basically, the Muslims called him Musaylima as an insult. So when you go from, many of you know, right? You take a form of a word and you do something called the diminutive form, right? You make it like a smaller form. So from Hasan, you get the word Hussein, which is like the little Hasan, right? So it's like the cute version, right? So Hasan, you have a little Hasan, you call that Hussein. So sometimes you do that as a way of saying, oh, that's, a little version or it's a cute version, right? Sometimes it's a way to show praise or adore something. Sometimes you do it as an insult, right? Oh, you're like, oh, this little guy over here, right? Little sheikh or this little alim, right? You're doing that to show that the person doesn't have value. So for Maslama, the Muslims did the same thing. They said, oh, Musaylima, right? Like this inconsiderate, this useless individual who doesn't even, who's put him out of your mind, right? So there was an insult that people gave him that name. And Rasulullah had also referred to him as that as well too, right? By this sort of insulting name. So he came from the region Al-Yamama, right? Which is in the Najd region of Hijaz. So many of you have heard the word Najd, the Najd region before. And you should know that because that's the same place where Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab came from as well. Something that in narrations in both Shia and Sunni books that have been said, people who come from this region seem to have a lot of issues going on, right? So the Wahhabi movement is starting from this area, and this specific tribe that came and Musaylima was a part of also came from this region. So it's interesting that, look, we're being told, both Sunnis and Shias are being told, people from this region, be very careful because there seems to be something off with these people. So when the Prophet had been declaring his mission, various tribes would come and they say, what's going on? What's this guy Muhammad saying? So they would send a delegation of their tribe. They'd go and see what he has to say. And then normally that delegation, they would accept. They'd come back to their tribe in their various province and they'd say, hey, we met this guy. He's telling the truth. So now all of our tribe accepts the religion of Islam. That's what normally would happen, right? So same thing. For this tribe, the tribe of Musaylima, he was part of the delegation, right? A small group. They sent them out. So him and some individuals, they take a caravan, they take a trip from Al-Yamama to Rasulullah in Medina. So they go to him, and on the way there, Musaylima was a talker, right? He liked to talk a lot, he liked to big himself up a lot, he was his own hype man, or if we're going to use today's terminology. So as he was going and, people were talking about, who is this guy Muhammad? What is he talking about? What is he saying? Are we going to follow him or not? So Musaylima was like, what? Along the way, telling everybody, if this guy Muhammad, if he makes me his successor, if he appoints me as his successor, then I'll follow him. Then I'll listen to what he has to say. So even before meeting him, he's setting conditions. And he's telling people about this as well. So finally, that group, the caravan, reaches Rasulullah. And again, they all are kind of hearing the same things. Musaylima, again, he's talking himself up, saying, yeah, if you accept me as their successor, you appoint me as their successor, then yeah, I'll accept you as the prophet of God as well. So Rasulullah replies to him. He says, لو سألتني هذه القطعة ما أعطيتكها. At that point, when they had come and met him, Rasulullah had a small little twig, like a palm tree branch in his hand. He said, look, if you had asked me just for this branch, not for prophethood or not for being a successor, if you had just asked me for this branch, and that was a condition for you accepting my wilayah and my nubuwah, it's like I would have rejected you as well. It's like I would never even give you this. Your word means absolutely nothing to me. Don't set conditions on accepting the truth. If you had asked just for this little branch, I wouldn't have even given that to you. And then he continued, وَلَنْ أَتَعَدَّ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ فِيكَ. It's like, do you think that I'm going to transgress and break Allah's commands just for the sake of you? Like, who are you to come and set these conditions? وَلَئِنْ أَدْبَرْتَ. It's like, so if you decide to reject now, like now that I've explained to you the truth, right? After he explained them the truth of Islam, if you, Musaylima, if you decide now, like, okay, you know what? He's not accepting my conditions, forget it. Even though he's speaking the truth, I'm going to reject it. Rasulullah is saying, if you go now, you turn your back, you leave Islam, you don't accept what I'm saying, then لَيَعْقِرَنَّكَ اللَّهُ. Very, very harsh words. He said, if you do that, Allah will not just absolutely destroy you, Allah will completely destroy your lineage, your future generations. You'll be cut off forever. That's how bad it'll be. When somebody is this adamant, when they reject the obvious truth, or in other words, like Musaylima, when they start setting conditions for the truth, then it seems as though Rasulullah is saying that Allah will completely cut you off from the rest of this world. You won't even have any offspring left, because Allah doesn't want your type of thinking to be in this world anymore. This is a very, very difficult disease that you and I need to discuss. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A lot of us are doing the same thing right now too. When we come to Islam, we don't come with an open mind. We don't come saying, Allah, your Quran is truth, I'll let the Quran tell me what to do. Ahlul Bayt, you are the other half of the Thaqalain. I'll look at what the ulama say about you, your teachings, the rules, theology, and then I'll believe those things. A lot of us don't do that. We come with our own preconceived notions, our own cultural baggage and background, our own assumptions and presumptions about what we think is right or wrong, and then we start demanding God. We start forcing our own ideas into the Quran. Whether it's liberal ideas that we have, whether it's traditional conservative ideas from culture in the East, culture in the West, whatever it is, we take these ideas, sometimes it's science or modernism or postmodernism, whatever it is. We take all of our own baggage, ideological baggage, and we force feed it into the Quran. We force feed it into the Hadith. And we expect it. And if we don't get the results we like, then we just cut that ayah out. We cut the Hadith out, say, oh, this is inauthentic, this doesn't count. And I've heard individuals say this, so-called practicing Muslims, will say, you know what, if this is actually the belief of Islam, then forget it. I'm not going to bother with it. I don't want to give examples, but I think many of you have heard this sort of ideas as well. If Islam really says this about women, if Islam really says this about dress codes, if Islam really says this about non-Muslims, if Islam really says this about X, Y, Z, then you know what, forget it. It's not for me. Well, then maybe you're right. Maybe Islam's not for you. Islam is submission to the truth. If the truth is not for you, then no problem. There's a lot of other religions that are available. You go ahead and pick and choose if that's what you want to do. If you are looking for the truth and you're ready to submit to the truth, then Islam would make sense for you, and then you would submit to the truth. But if somebody recognizes that this is the truth, and then they turn their back on that, and this is going to be a very, very serious spiritual disease, and there's going to be severe spiritual repercussions. So to take this to contemporary times, for us right now, if we have all these preconceived notions in our mind, and when the Imam returns, inshallah, he starts saying, well, Islam is actually not like this. Whatever you guys are practicing, that's incorrect. This cultural thing you're doing, actually that's not right. This stuff that even all of your ulama have been saying, this is incorrect. We have in narrations that it's going to seem like the Imam's going to bring a new religion to us. It's going to be so foreign to a lot of us. Even some of the ulama, so-called ulama, will go against the Imam because of that. And when that happens, what side do you want to be on? If you're coming with theological baggage, then you'll be directly against the Imam. Even knowing that he's the right person, you might say, you know what, I can't leave my culture behind. I can't leave my own presumptions behind. I can't leave my own theology behind. Whatever I've been doing for 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years, that's the way I want to do it. I don't care what anybody else has to say. This is the same thing we face right now, even when certain speakers or scholars or, legitimate ulama come and try to explain something from a different perspective. Immediately we say, well, I heard something different for my whole life, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Who is this person to come and tell me different? I know better. Well, okay, if you think you know better from sitting at the minbar for 20, 30 years and never reading a book, then fine. When individuals who have actually studied are offering different perspectives, at the very least do some research, ask some questions from a humble perspective. These small little issues, you might think they're small. These small little issues, these small little changes could be those red lines which may make or break us. They may lead us to join the Imam of the time, or they may make us fight against the Imam of the time. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, this is what happened during the time of Musaylima. So he says, make me your successor. The Prophet basically, tears him up, insults him in front of everybody. The rest of the tribe says, yeah, he's a prophet. Even Musaylima agrees. Yeah, fine, he's a prophet. They go back to Al-Yamama. They go back to their area, right? Their part of Hijaz. When they get back there, and then they find, they hear word that, okay, Rasulullah has passed away, then Musaylima says, you know what? actually, I'm a prophet too. Did you guys know that? He starts declaring his own prophethood. And he uses all these tactics. For example, he made up his own ayat of Quran. Apparently, he was a very, very good poet. He went and composed his own sort of poetry, ayat, told people. People listened to it. It sounded beautiful to them. They said, okay. That was one thing that convinced them. In addition, he also ended up marrying somebody, this lady named Sajjah bint al-Harith, who, interestingly enough, she also declared prophethood too. All right, so the husband, this guy Musaylama, he says, I'm a prophet, finds this lady, Sajjah, and she says, oh, guess what, I'm a prophet too. So now these two prophets are married to each other, right? Or she's a prophetess, I guess, technically, right? Interesting, right? It's like, normally we say that behind every great man is a great woman. Well, in this case, behind every person who's going, every terrible man is a terrible woman. Same thing, right? So she declares her own prophethood too. So now there's husband and wife prophets. Interestingly enough too, the dowry that he offered her, his wife Sajjah, he told his followers that the dowry, the mahar that I'm offering her is that for all of my followers, whoever follows my religion, they don't have to pray Fajr and they don't have to pray Isha anymore. That was the dowry that he offered. Normally we're supposed to offer money, or sometimes we take, we offer ziyarah for women, or to teach them Quran or something like that. He says that as a gift to my ummah, Musaylama says, I'm going to get rid of Fajr and I'm going to get rid of Isha prayers. I'm sure many of you, you hear this, you're like, oh, I would have married the guy if that was my time too. Right? That sounds like a nice mahar. Let's hear some of the other things that he brought in his Islam too. So immediately he gets married, he cuts out two of the wajib prayers. So he says, look, okay, we only have 3 prayers. All you have is Dhuhr, Asr, and Maghrib. And then later on in his life, he said, you know what? These prayers actually don't even matter altogether. So he cut out every single wajib prayer. Remember, he didn't deny Rasulullah was a prophet. He said he's still a prophet, the Quran is still valid, but I am also a prophet too. So I have my say in these things as well. So then eventually he cut out all of the namaz. Next he said, you know how Muhammad said that there's a fixed direction, you have to pray towards the Qibla, which is the Kaaba? No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to pray towards the Kaaba. And you know what? They're saying that Kaaba is Baytullah, it's the house of Allah. That doesn't make sense either. And what's his reasoning? 2 things. He says, well, Allah himself says in the Quran, فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Anywhere you turn, there is Allah. So why do you have to point to one direction and pray to Him? So pray, talk to Allah any direction that you want. Don't worry about the Kaaba. And why does he say that Allah doesn't have a house, that Kaaba is not his house? He says, well, Allah is a God. Gods don't need houses. That doesn't make any sense. So that Kaaba is actually not God's house. Now you and I might think that, oh, that's what a crazy, ridiculous argument. But it's very, very similar arguments that many individuals right now make in our communities, and even some so-called Muslim speakers and scholars are making very, very similar arguments. They may not say the exact same things right now, but they're on their way there. Like, oh, this is beyond God, right? This doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive with Tawheed, right? This is too much focused on this stuff, right? What about, Allah is everywhere and Allah is this and that. They use the same sort of rationale and they bring their own kind of new, progressive, liberal version of Islam. Same sort of stuff. If that's not all, let me bring you some more of Musaylama's version of Islam. Fasting. So when is fasting normally? From Fajr until Maghrib, right? He said, you know what? That doesn't make sense. He completely flipped it around and said Fajr is going to be at nighttime, from Maghrib until Fajr. I know some of you are hearing this like that. This sounds like a really nice Islam. I like this better. The ruling for men to be, to get circumcised, he said, no, that doesn't make sense. He got rid of that too. He said, all these differences in rulings between men and women, he said, I'm going to get rid of that. Men and women are equal. Zina, right? Adultery, fornication, he said, that's fine. Drinking wine, yeah, that's okay too. Iblis, he said, Iblis actually doesn't even exist. What do you mean Iblis doesn't exist? He said, it doesn't make sense. God is so amazing. God is so merciful. How could he create somebody and then allow that person to misguide humans? It doesn't make any sense. This was his argument. I guarantee if somebody like that sat in the minbar right now and provided these arguments, you would say the same. You'd say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Vava, subhanallah. You'd send a nod ahead there probably. It would make so much sense to you, right? You might think, okay, you know what? This person with all this fake stuff, I'm sure he only had a handful of followers. According to some historians, he had upwards of 40,000 individuals following this religion. 40,000 people who were saying that they follow Rasulullah. Now they're saying, no, Musaylama makes sense. He's also a prophet. And they're following this new religion. At the same time as the prophet, or right after, immediately after the death and demise of the Prophet. This is what people are doing. Again, he did other things too. He had these fake miracles that he would perform, like he'd be able to put eggs in bottles, or he would cut feathers off of birds and then reattach them and say, oh, it can still fly. Like, do these kind of things. All these things. Now, some of the miracles actually, we call reverse miracles, right? He tried to perform certain things because he got carried away and really thought he was a prophet. And he tried to do like amazing things. And then Allah kind of, showed him like, look, you need to calm down. So for example, we know that even the saliva of a representative of God has value, right? We know that the saliva of the Prophet, right? What he had done one day in Khandaq when the eyes of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Sorry, Khaybar, not Khandaq. At Khaybar, Imam Ali had this eye disease, right? I think he had an eye infection. So Rasulullah had taken some of his saliva, had wiped it on the eye of Imam Ali, and it became healed. And there's many other narrations we have about even the saliva of the prophets have this kind of value. So Musaylama's like, yeah, my spit must be cool too. Okay. So one day he said, look at this well. Watch what happens when I spit in it. And he expected like it starts flowing out. So he spit in the well and then it dried up. People are like, oh, okay, what happened? He said, okay, let me try something else. So somebody brought a child to him. They said, oh, please Musaylama, pray for our child. He said, okay. So he takes the child, prays for him. He pats the child, moves his head, very gently caresses the child's head. When he does that, the child immediately goes bald. He said, oh, oops, sorry about that. Passes the child back. We know that many of the Muslims, whenever the Prophet and the Imams, they'd perform wudu, they would go and take that leftover water, right? After the Prophet was done wiping, they'd take that water and they'd get the barakah from that. So the same thing, they'd take the leftover wudu water from Musaylama, they would take that and they would put it in a garden. And from that garden, no plant would ever grow again. They're like, okay, something seems off here, something's wrong. And even worse, somebody came and they said, I have a problem with my eyes. He said, okay, I can take care of that, no problem. He patted the person's eyes and they went blind. So towards the end, he got a little too carried away. Allah's like, you know what? I should make this very, very obvious for people. And you know what? It wasn't just Musaylama. It wasn't just his wife, Sajjah, who were claiming prophet. There was a third person at that same point. At least three individuals all claiming that they're prophets. This other person, Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid. He said, yeah, I'm a prophet too. Right after the demise of the prophet, all these people keep coming out and saying all these things, and people, they're following them. Like I said, Abu Bakr's coming out one by one, having to, eliminate all these people who are claiming to be prophets. This is right after the time of the prophet, not hundreds of years later, not during the times of the later imams, right after the death of the prophet. This is how dangerous weak ideology can be. Many of us, our ideology becomes so weak that we can fall for anything. All right? And I was giving these examples. Somebody can come in the minbar and say, something very, very simple. I don't want to give examples, right? Because I don't want you to keep specific speakers in your mind. But the idea is this. If our aqa'id is not strong, if our critical thinking is not strong, any individual will come, they'll say whatever they want about any topic, and we're going to buy it right away. Any contemporary issue, they're going to sway us one way. Any political issue, they'll sway us one way. Any theological issue, they'll make us believe one thing. Any legal fiqh issue, they'll change our minds about that. If we are not firmly established in the true teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, then you and I are going to be on the complete opposite side of the 12th Imam when he comes. And when he does come and he says all of these real things in Islam, and we're on the opposite side, we might say, oh, that person's a false Imam. So one of the things that we need to do, inshallah, is to make sure that we strengthen our aqaid. And inshallah, we'll continue this discussion next week and give some basic tips on how we're able to do that, inshallah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, in summation, we started this new subtopic about building a wilaya-ready community. How do we get ourselves ready for the Imam? The same way that the 6th Imam, he built this wikala system, we want to do the same thing. We want to get ourselves ready for when the 12th Imam says, I'm the Imam, we have everything ready. What are the pieces of the puzzle that we have to do? Number one, let's think about theology, aqa'id, beliefs. Let's start thinking about what were some of the obstacles. One of them, even during the time of the Prophet and right after, were people who were so susceptible to false ideas, they completely left Islam right away. We need to make sure that we strengthen our iman, strengthen our aqa'id, so that we don't fall into these same traps as well. And we're going to continue next week and give some tips about that, inshallah. With that, we can jump to the Slido quiz. I don't think there was any Q&A. Yeah, there was no Q&A, so we can jump right to the quiz, inshallah. So hopefully you've all logged in. Okay, a couple of you. And as we give a few seconds for people to log in, just a reminder, There is a program, a youth program, Saturday night. It's an ice cream social, which will be for, at least on the flyer, I think it was between ages 16 to 25. And I believe we're starting right before Maghrib. I think it's like 8:15. So check the newsletter. I think it went out in the WhatsApp broadcast as well, and it should hopefully be on orlandocenter.org as well. There'll be a lot of things besides ice cream. There'll be games. There'll be a discussion game too that, for those of you who are interested, we'll be playing this game called the 2 a.m. Talk. And if you haven't heard about it before, Google it. It's called the 2 a.m. Talk, right? It's interesting, just a card game with questions. You know, I introduced it before. So if anybody's interested, we'll play that as well. There's a whole bunch of other things that we'll be doing, inshallah. And this is Saturday night for youths 16 to 25. Okay, so assalamu alaikum to everybody. Muzammil Jan Muhammad, Rizwan Jafar, Z, Specialist, Yusuf Ali, Believer, RMJ, Sayyid Hussein, Play-Doh, Fatima Ali, Muhammad Salah, Specialist, I think I said already. Okay. We'll wait maybe another few seconds. Sai, or SY. Communication Parpia, Khoja, Sabah, Hadi, another Z with 2 E's, Sakina. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good luck. According to some narrations, where and when did Imam Sadiq alayhi salam publicly invite Muslims towards following him? Was it on top of the Kaaba on Eid al-Adha, in Karbala on Ashura, in Medina on Eid al-Ghadir, in Arafah on Yom al-Arafah, or none of the above? So this is something that we had gone over on Saturday. So I think most of you hopefully remember, because I think you're hitting in your answers fairly quickly. Yeah, okay, so 45% of you remembered. It was on the plains of Arafah on Yom al-Arafah, right? The 9th of Dhul Hijjah. That's when he had declared it. Hasan. So that means 50% of you either weren't paying attention or weren't tuning in on Saturday. Second, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is reported to have said that taqiyya is the what of a mu'min? The sign of a mu'min, the sword of a mu'min, the shield of a mu'min, or the last resort of a mu'min? Again, this is something also we quickly, in passing, had mentioned on Saturday. So now, again, really quickly, a lot of people have, that was fast. 52% of you got it right. He said it's a turs, the shield of a mu'min. And if ever we get a chance, there's a very interesting tafsir about what this narration actually means, because our concept of taqiyya is completely backwards, but that's for another time. The wikala system started with which imam? 5th imam, 6th imam, 8th imam, or 12th imam? Alayhimu salatu wassalam. Okay, so all of these so far are all left over from Saturday. Ahsant, okay, there we go. Now 74% of you got it, right? It was started in the time of the 6th Imam. He strengthened it, and it continued all the way, pretty much until the time of the 12th Imam. Okay, final one, our non-Islamic question. America Online, AOL, started out as which of these online service providers? Prodigy, Quantum Link, Genie, or CompuServe? So, all of you I almost said 80s, right? 90s people, you should know that, right? I mean, those of you who didn't grow up with dial-up and stuff like this, you have no idea how difficult it was back then, right? With dial-up and modems, and you're online, you're doing work, somebody picks up the phone. Like, this was a whole different level of difficulty. So 37% of you got it right. It was actually Quantum Link, which I didn't even remember. CompuServe, Prodigy, Genie, they were all different, separate companies altogether. And pretty much if you were like me, what you did is you got your free trial for each and every one of them, you used it up, and then you went over to the cheapest one. Congratulations to Kristaps, right? Very good. So you're good in basketball and you're good in Slido quizzes as well. Ahsant. And you're the only one who got 4 out of 4 this time as well. So congratulations to you. So for those of you who are 16 to 25, hopefully we'll see you Saturday night, inshallah. Hopefully hey, you're not supposed to show that screen. What are you doing? Get rid of that screen. Okay. Inshallah, those of you will see you Saturday night. And then we'll continue our topic Thursday night. And if there's any questions, again, there was nothing left over. We'll continue and address that on Slido Thursday night as well. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahl baytihi tayyibin tahirin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي. طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلامه وأقدمهم إيمانه وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم السابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. اللهم إني تعرضت لزيارة أوليائك رغبة في ثوابك ورجاء لمغفرتك وجزيل إحسانك، فأسألك أن تصلي على محمد وآله الطاهرين، وأن تجعل رزقي بهم دارا وعيشي بهم قارة وزيارتي بهم مقبولة وحياتي بهم طيبة، وأدرجني إدراج المكرمين، واجعلني ممن ينقلب من زيارتي مشاهد أحبائك مفلحا منجحا قد استوجب غفران الذنوب وستر العيوب وكشف الكروب، إنك أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة. السلام عليك يا تسعة المأسومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا سيدي مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.